Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 6th episode of car sketching, or sketching in my car. I'm probably going to change the name of this series because people may think that I'm actually sketching cars. So what I've got going on here is a drawing that I started yesterday. I put about maybe 30 minutes into it, maybe a little more, maybe 35 minutes into it during my lunch hour. And instead of starting the drawing with measurements, I thought this time I would film, me tightening up the drawing and getting the values right. As you can see, the general proportions seem pretty good. I did use my handy measuring tool to get the basic proportions down and make sure that I was, going along in the right direction. But I am noticing as I come back to it today that the dark areas in the drawing are, so much more rich here. Of course, competing with Michelangelo is a doomed project from the start, but I definitely could improve some of these areas that should be much darker on the drawing. So instead of using my F drawing pencil, I'm probably going to now make the switch and go to a darker lead, and this is my HB. It's a little softer, it's a little darker, and I should be able to get closer to some of those values. Of course, it'll never be the same as using this amazing sepia ink. So the first thing that jumps out at me is this part here right above his very enormous Adam's apple. So I'm going to start darkening that in. You see how much darker this pencil is, so this should be a good choice. I'm also going to do this area here where his neck is straining forward, and I'm building the values up with a crosshatch method because that is what's going on in Michelangelo's drawing, and who am I to change that? So I think the whole underside of the neck here really needs to get darker. Now what I don't want to do is emphasize a portion of the drawing, like the neck for instance, that maybe isn't as important or the focal point as the face. So I'm going to proceed with caution here and just try to keep that in mind as I go, that I want to make sure that I'm doing this, that I'm putting the right focus in the more logical parts of the drawing. So if I go too dark with this, then that means I've created quite a project of myself to go even darker where I want the viewer's eye to go. So right now I'm looking at this area and I'm going, well, it really needs to be more of this sort of upside down V area. And that's, I think, about as dark as I want to go. But I am going to sketch along here to get, this whole area to drop back a little bit. And because I've pushed this darker now, immediately one thing leads to another, and you can see where this area of the drawing needs to actually be as dark, or preferably even a little darker, so that the area that's more forward, which is the jawbone and the chin, more forward than the neck, needs to come forward in value and get darker. So I've sketched that in. I'm going to leave that for now. It's always great to jump around while you're trying to get your values right, because you don't want to do too much in one area, and as I say, then all of a sudden you're trying to correct the rest of the drawing to a degree that maybe you wouldn't have chosen to go as dark. So this seems to be a very important part of the drawing, the boniness of his cheekbone. I turned my car off, so hopefully you can maybe even hear the pencil scraping along. I know when I watch other YouTubers do this, I love to hear the sounds of the work as it's going along, whether it's paintbrushes or fussing with pencils or whatever. It just adds to the experience a little bit. So I'm definitely getting in here with the nose area because there's quite a lot of drama here. This guy has quite the nose. I love it. It's kind of unclear to me in the drawing whether you could actually see his nostril, if that was in fact his nostril. A little tough to tell, but because it's all dark, I don't really have to resolve that. This underside was very obvious in the drawing, so I'm trying to capture that. And also his lips are pretty dark here, so I'm not sure why I drew that light. So I'm going to go darker there. And overall pretty happy with the mouth. You know, the mouth has always been tricky for me anyway. Maybe you all find that to be not a difficult portion of the face, but certainly in portraiture, I feel like the mouth is one of the trickiest parts to get right. A lot of intricate folds. Again, I'm going to call out, as I have in my past videos, that, you know, when an area is curved like this and you're starting to head towards the line, you'll see that there's a little attention to detail there. When you call out that area and then you let it get light again before the line hits, that's really a great thing to keep in mind. It really creates a nice look on the drawing. And you'll see a lot of the masters did it. I'm also seeing this importance here where this jaw is. And I'm going to throw that in. It's quite dark on the master drawing. The repetition of line and the distance between the marks is something that, you know, the more you do it, the more you gain better control. It's a little more challenging when you're drawing in your car to be able to lean your hand in the right position all the time. I would back up and show you where my arm is leaning, except it took me a while to get this angled right on the camera. So you'll just have to trust me, it's a little awkward. So I tend to draw better lines than this when I'm able to cradle the notebook in front of me. I notice that there's quite a bit of dramatic line here before the ear. And it's important to do that cross-hatching because if you just go in one direction, it might have the appearance of being hair, which we don't want that in this area of the face, at least. So I feel like his nose is really kind of disappeared, and I think the reason why the nose works so well here is Michelangelo threw in some beautiful background line art, so I am going to do that as well. So this is where you do have to be a little more careful about your lines because they're going to be quite visible. I'm putting a lot of space in between, but then I'll go and throw lines in between those if I want to darken it further. Sometimes it's nice to leave the drama of the lines. The space between creates, oops, that was a mistake, obviously. I also don't know what I got on this paper here, but, oh, okay, that came off. So it's always good too to not stop. I find it's really tough to get back in the groove of the line once you've pulled out of it. So as many lines as you can do in a row is great. I also find that coming towards you with the line work is a lot easier, like this, than it would be to go the opposite direction. Of course, when you go to join them, you want to be really careful you get the angle as close as possible. Obviously, I didn't do it perfectly, but I can live with this. Sometimes too, I do have to turn the drawing around to get a better angle with my hand, because I definitely want to put some cross-hatching here. Notice how fast I'm drawing the line, and that's because the quicker you draw it, typically, the more controlled the line will be. If you labor over the line, it can get warbly. So I'm throwing it in pretty quick. I'm sort of trailing it off here. I feel like this could use a little more. And then don't worry about having to fill in. It creates a lot of interest, actually, when you have to throw in other pieces of line. And I'm always glancing up at the drawing to see WWMD, what would Michelangelo do in a case like this? How dark is it against his forehead? How dark should I go? Do I care to get it exact, or is it good enough to just get it close, since it's not part of his facial features? Okay, now I'm going to take a look. It's funny how you don't really know how it looks until you turn it right side up. I think that did a lot to sort of pull that line up. Getting a lot of glare right now because there's a beautiful sunlight coming in the car, but I'm going to try to block that because I feel like it's causing some dramatic shadow in the camera work. So there we are. That seems better. Apologize for the shaking. And I noticed that in his hair, he's got a lot more areas where it got more detailed. But if you notice, his detail is not really that dramatic. He's just got areas where he shades it in one fell swoop, like this area here, which I love. And then he changes the direction and all of a sudden does this over here, which is kind of interesting that he does that. And then he trails up into just some lines that are all on their own. I feel like it is important for me to make sure I indicate that his skull continues here. So I'm going to get a little more lines here to get volume, because if I don't, I feel like it looks like he has no head, and we don't want him to have the appearance of no skull. You can see how dark it got in the drawing, and I want to make sure I capture some of that. So I'm not being as careful over here. I'm definitely more careful, obviously, when you get into the features. But I do want to darken some parts of this ear. Get really in there. But again, the drawing is not about the ear, so I want to make sure I proceed with caution here and not get too involved with all the folds, or it could take away from the face. You always want to be thinking of your focal point. You hear about focal points when people talk about oil painting, especially, and watercolor painting, but I think it's just as important in a drawing to really know where you want the attention to be, so that you can intentionally get it to work in that area. It's all about what you're creating, and you're the director. So I also feel like the eye is extremely dark, which I'm happy with, but unfortunately the areas around it are not. And you can see in Michelangelo's drawing that these areas are just as dark as the eyes, so I want to create some of that look. And you know, I'm still looking up at the master drawing a lot, but a little less than I was in the beginning when I was really doing the measuring. Now I'm really more interested in what my drawing looks like. Does it hold together as it is? And more interested in that than actually an accurate copy at this point. Because when people view this drawing, and certainly when I view this drawing, I'm not going to be comparing it to the copy side by side. So I want to make sure, you know, the drawing exists well on its own. You see how I kicked this area back? I had a lot of white in here, and by kicking that back, I think it really pulled that area of the nose together. But it's making me notice that I need to get a little bit more defined around this part of the nose, a little more dramatic here. You can see here it just sort of divides in that area. I definitely want to kick back some of this. When I say kick back, I might be darkening it, or I might be lightening it, but what I mean is I'm just trying to make that area a little less important so that it works in harmony with the areas around it. So overall, just gradually building this up. I noticed that around where the hairline starts, Michelangelo very cleverly put a little more emphasis on the darkness there, and that sort of draws attention to a texture change in the drawing where the hair begins compared with the skin. So I am taking his cue and I'm throwing that in to get that darker. A lot more interest going on here than what I have started in this area. So I'm throwing that in as well. It looks like he's really captured the way his model, who I don't know, is possibly the devil, I have no idea, where it undulates, where his forehead just sort of goes like that. So I'm trying to get the feeling of that as it is captured in his drawing. I noticed that there's, a very light area here, and I didn't really call that out. So I don't erase a lot. I feel like I'm cautious enough with how I draw. I build things up somewhat slowly that I don't really have to erase a lot. But once in a while, I'll find a spot where I go, oh, pencil went a little wild in that area. I got a little carried away, and I needed to leave some shading there. So I'm doing that. Thanks all to everyone who has subscribed to my channel. I know these are not action-packed videos. I'm just trying to share as I work in real time the things that are kind of going through my head as I'm making adjustments to a drawing, hoping that it will shed some light on maybe some areas of your drawing, or maybe you just appreciate art and like to just watch somebody work. And that's great too. We need art appreciators just as much as we need creators in this world. So thanks if you're just an art appreciator and you're hanging in here through these pretty low-key films. So up here I notice there's like a lot of interesting texture. So I'm gonna kick this little clamp back a little bit so that I can get this. I'm gonna do a quick measurement. I think it'd be worth it. So I'm gonna go from this area of the skull to the outermost part of the hair. And one thing I always do when I take a measurement is, as I move my measuring tool over to my drawing, I usually remind myself where it was. I'll say edge of hair, curve of forehead, and I make sure I keep the measuring tool in the same angle. So here's the curve of forehead, and there is where the hair should start. And all I need is just a little line to remind me of where that is. And then you're done with measuring. After that, you're going to start in that area and draw everything in between. And don't go past that area much, because the whole point of measuring, obviously, is to keep that accurate. And you'll see that without, a real complicated measuring, procedure, we've got a good idea of where that should be. And if I'd done it without measuring it, I think I would have thought it was much farther out. And it's really not. So I'm always kind of amazed at how wrong I would have been if I didn't take that quick measurement. So I'm going to start drawing in some of these kind of complicated curls. And then one thing that's really important to do is try not to duplicate the same line too many times. It can be really hard not to do that. You get into a rhythm and you want to do a curve, a curve, a curve, and it ends up looking like funky waves. And you could see that Michelangelo really doesn't have that problem. He's sort of got that part nailed down, that guy. Anyway, he's the master. He's the reason why we all copy him today. A modern master, and I have to say he is a master for such a young man that I follow online, is Cesar Santos. He's just an amazing painter. He's an amazing draftsman. He'll go through his sketchbooks, and I highly recommend you check him out and follow his channel, which his filming is so much more, his film quality is just so much better than what I'm doing here, for sure, as well as his artwork. But thanks for being patient with me on my filming. I hope to get better at it, but honestly, if I took more time getting the filming right, I just wouldn't have the time to do the drawings as often as I do. And at this point, when I have a full-time job and doing my thing, I need to make sure I spend most of my time actually creating the content and not perfecting the videos. So okay, so I'm kicking back this whole area because as I really look at this, there really is no white area here on Michelangelo's drawings. So wow, it's getting warm in the car. It's a hot day here. I'm in Framingham, Massachusetts, and it is early August, and I do need to open my door for a second because, wow, I need air. But I don't want to turn my car on because it makes the camera move. Okay, so I got a little air. I'll live. Sorry about the shaking. So as I was saying, I have noticed that there's really quite a lot of shading here, and I want to make sure I capture that. He's already starting to look better. Sometimes if a line is too dramatic, like that one that I just did there, it's really important that if you notice it right away, just try to correct it, because you could get involved in another part of the drawing and sort of forget that insight that you had that might not come back. And then you'll notice it way after you've finished the drawing. And with these drawings in this notebook, because I draw on each, every other page, this drawing will eventually get this page very dirty, so I end up having to fix the drawings with a fixative. I use a workable fixative in case I want to go back in, but I have to say that when you use a fixative, even though it remains workable, it does change the texture of the paper, and you never really get that same surface again. So I try to complete the drawing before I mess around with fixatives. I'm trying to get this part of the eye a little bit more dramatically dark, like his is. And I feel like I've got a little bit of a sleepy look here, which he doesn't really have. And I'm thinking thinking it's because I don't have enough drama around the eye here. And I think that really improved it. I still feel like this line just was too heavy. I went a little crazy with that line, and now I'm just feeling like I'm competing with it. So in order to make that line just not grab your attention as much, I'm actually fixing the areas around it to correct that problem by darkening everything around it, and that will make that area a little less important. Sorry guys, I have to start my car. It is so hot in this car right now. Hopefully it won't affect the sound too much. So I'm taking a look now, and I'm just trying to see, you know, where I still need to tweak. Getting real close to thinking about wrapping this one up. I just want to make sure I have enough structure back here with the skull. And I want to take another quick measurement, because I'm seeing here in the drawing that this is a very important measurement where his head ends. Now I might not have enough paper to do that, but I'm going to go and get a quick measurement here and see if it runs off the page. So I'm going from that indentation of the hair to the back of the skull. So from, let's see, from that indentation of the hair to the back of the skull. Okay, excellent. I'm still on my paper, so I'm going to capture that dark line. And it may seem like an arbitrary thing in Michelangelo's drawing, but trust me, there's nothing arbitrary about the way this guy drew. I mean, he draws, it looks casual, but it's genius. So you'll see that by kind of grabbing that and just, I'm gonna make it maybe a little darker than what he did. I think it's gonna really help pull this together. And I don't want the viewer to think that the head continues past that point, so I'm gonna just get rid of that right there. And I'm gonna bring this down to really create the illusion that the head is here and it's ending here, so that I can get some structure to his head. I think that made a big difference. I'm also gonna go and darken it up here too. I should probably have one more clamp on this drawing to avoid me touching the drawing so much. I'll have to look at my other clamp. It really helps to clamp your drawing down so that you're not, you know, messing with it, and you can focus. So I'm throwing a little more darkness here because I want to get the structure, the importance of the structure down. I also want to get a little bit more detail into his hair. I know I said I was almost done, but I like the way he did these little blobs of hair and the way he darkened around them so that they stood out. Here I'm trying to mimic his sort of fast moving. I almost never do this kind of movement. I always do one line at a time. I feel like it looks a lot better, but it looks like he really scribbled in this area. And so I'm trying to mimic what he did. Because I usually don't let myself scribble, but hey, Michelangelo did it. I'm thinking he probably had a good idea there. So that actually added something to the drawing for sure. Just jump around. It's really important to jump around while you're doing this so that you don't, you know, neglect pieces of the drawing. I'm also going to try to indicate too that the head continues up here. Just trying to pull that together a little bit. don't want to kill some of those whites in the hair though, because it's creating, you know, a really important texture difference to the skin. Now I'm freezing, so I just turned my car off. And if you haven't watched any of my videos before, I am drawing in my car before I go into work, and I am paranoid about people seeing me as they're parking next to me and walking in. But you know what? I don't care. You know, don't let those things stop you from creating. You know, if you're embarrassed to take an easel outside and give a try because you think, you know, the artwork's not going to come out right and somebody might look over your shoulder and see it, you got to get over that. I think one of the best things to do as you sketch, like, you know, force yourself to get out in public a little bit, because, I mean, I know I'm not really out in public. I'm kind of in my car. But I've taken sketchbooks to the zoo before, and I'll tell you, it's weird at first, but then it gets really kind of fun, and people want to talk to you and ask you questions, and, you know, these days they definitely want to take, you know, pictures and of your drawings, and I don't know, I think it's kind of fun once you get over your shyness of people watching you work. It's kind of neat. I haven't done that in a while. I'd love to do that again. Love drawing animals, so been really concentrating on figure drawing a lot lately. I always felt like it was something that I took to when I was at RISD. It was one of my favorite things to do. I felt like it came a little easier to me than dealing with color. So to build my confidence back up when I started really getting heavily into art again lately, I thought it'd be best to just start with something I felt like I had a knack for, and figure drawing was always something that I felt like I could do a little easier than, you know, painting, dealing with colors, and in addition to drawing and values. So I hope you do look me up and check out my Facebook page, Artwork by Mary, and my name's spelled M-A-R-I, so that maybe you can see some of my step-by-step drawings that I have, paintings that I have on that Facebook page. And some people find it really helpful to see from start to finish, so I'm really careful to document that so that I can share it. I'm noticing his line quality here is really interesting, so I'm trying to put that in. And this was much darker, so I guess his shoulder back there. I think I'm about finished for now. It's really hard to stop because I'm having fun. Just noticing there should be a little line work here. I'm looking at that area here, and instead of it fading to white the way I have it, it's kind of fun, you know, to work with a drawing that's already figured out. You learn so much. You'll go, why is it dark there, and what does he do in this area? And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, when I do this, it does improve the drawing, and that's why he did it. And it's just a great way to learn. So don't worry about copying other people's work, especially people who've been dead for many, many years. But just even contemporary artists today, as long as you don't sign it as if it's your own and misrepresent it, I think you can learn from each other, and I welcome it. I'd be very flattered if someone copied one of my paintings. So anyway, I hope other people feel that way too. I think we should all learn from each other. Back in the day, there were mentors when people really valued art, and apprentices, I guess they were called. And that's how people learned. It's just copying and doing some grunt work for another artist. Here, sharpen my pencil. Anyway, hey, listen, thanks for stopping by. and I hope you join me for another video at some point. And thanks very much. Please like and subscribe if you liked it. I appreciate it. Bye.